to start with, we are here to speak about equity in Fin and in tech, and gender equity. And I would like to start with you, Alain. You are president of the French FinTech Association, and you recently carried out a study on gender equity together with Arkea. And could you please give us some feedback on the results? Yes, thank you. I have the pleasure of presiding this association, which board you are a member of. And this is representative of our office. We have 4 women, but although the president is a man, there is still room for improvement. We've worked on this topic of gender equity with our friends from Arkea, and Masha will probably add to my comments, and as well as Roland Berger. We carried out this study, and the results are bad to very bad. The study says that female staff in FinTech are about 30%, but only 12% within the managing teams, most of them in positions usually for women, such as HR or marketing. And if we take into account the founder and co-founders, it's less than 12%. Other features can be taken into account. Amongst fundraising, only one on the studied period was carried out by a woman. And Fin and Tech are having very poor results in terms of gender balance. Tech is almost as bad as finance, so we are gathering 2 issues at once. The study was both qualitative and quantitative, and Masha will tell you more about it. We studied education and bias in education, in particular in sciences. Secondly, the culture of finance, and finally, the auto censorship. To give you just a few figures, and maybe Masha will give you more context. University courses, more than 60% of our funders are engineers, and only 5% are women. This is a very strong percentage. It is very similar to what happens everywhere else in Europe. If you focus on computing, is even worse, only 15% of women. Most of positions in academies are held by men, and it starts at a high school. To make it simple, a stereotype is pink is for women and blue is for men. So only 47% of women in sciences, and if we go into more details, male tend to go to hard sciences like physics or mathematics, while women tend to pursue careers in biology, and men more in physics and mathematics. We also have other evidence on the FinTech ethics. It's not very well written for maternity leave in particular. So about fundraising, about 3.5 million for a fund raised by women compared to more than 5 million for funds raised by men. And the risk evaluation amongst the 12 major risks rating agencies, only there are only a few women, and 3 of them are in the same agency. So the agency is Laura Partners. We can see that there are bias in every environment. For the qualitative study, there is a form of undeserving. So when a man is faced with a challenge, he addresses it as a winner, while a woman is always wondering if she is in the right place, if she can do it. So hesitation is a major factor. And there are also biases in machine learning and deep learning, and we talked about it a little bit this morning. But spatial recognition is performs way better to identify men than women, and to identify white people rather than black people. So thank you. Welcome. I did not want to enter into psychiatric analysis right away, but we've started now. So do you want to come back and add to what was just said? Yes, Masha. So I'm in charge of sourcing within the strategic investment at Arkea. So we are working on acquisition opportunities and strategic partnerships. We we parted in this study because the main causes for the absence of women in our profession were highlighted. It's hard to document the non-tangible factors that are psychological barriers. They are not easy to document and gather data on. The first one is the fear of entrepreneurial. Women are very careful and doubtful. So this is probably anchored deeply in our culture, but the study also showed that ambition amongst women should be encouraged because it's not always spontaneous. Women have need to be supported when they get out of their comfort zone. And there is also this syndrome of feeling non-legitimate that is linked to a feeling of anxiety and nervousness. And I'm now more aware of it. I believe it's a cliche, but it's also linked to the mental charge. Women are also the head of their families, and they have a lot on their minds. So it just adds up and create anxiety, I believe. So please do divide chores at home. It will help as well. And the third psychological factor is over-competing situation. We were talking about it earlier. Women themselves, they are over-competing and they suffer from this lack of gender equity, but they also exacerbate the issue. So it's not about men against women, is just about adopting more inclusive behaviors, both ways. Thank you, and Laure, you were nodding when we were talking about non-feeling legitimate and auto-censorship. You are an elected representative within the region. What's your feeling about it? Yes, I'm delegated at the transfer and delegation at the regional council. So from the very beginning of my mandate, I've been around the region and meeting entrepreneur women, and I've been asked about it from women associations, asking me what we are doing to support women as entrepreneurs. And this is very positive because it means that there is a demand from women. So it's a strong signal that there are associations advocating on the ground for women to have more power. Your study was specific to FinTech, and we in the region did not have a targeted approach, but the figures you got are very close to the one we found. In Aquitaine, we have about 34% of women as company founders. It's growing rapidly, plus 52%. So from 15 to 23,000 women at the head of companies. And we also carried out comparative studies showing that women have more diplomas but less experience. They are more in some areas than others, and I can say that in FinTech I'm mainly surrounded by men, so women are mainly present in education, social and health sectors, and that's where they gained where they build their businesses. And I think this goes back to her background. On the 13th of July 1965, something really tremendous happened. Women were given the right to open a bank account without the consent of their husbands. It's not that long ago. It's when our grandmother were had our age. So these are barriers. It's not that women have less capacity or skills, but they do not dare. Yes, there is a heavy load on women. Yes, and you mentioned also about the fact that finance and tech is a combination of two sectors in which women are very poorly represented. So it's a reason for a very low figure.
Megan, I'd like to speak with you about your experience because you have a huge experience in Africa managing startups and especially in the fintech area. So could you share any figures with us or your point of view on the gender equity on this country?
Sure. So in the continent of Africa, we talk a little bit differently about entrepreneurship because the economy is so informal. So most people are actually entrepreneurs, but here in the French context, you'd say they're a small business owner. So if you look at the traditional small business owners, so someone selling in the market or a shopkeeper or a tailor, in Ghana, which is where I live, women actually do better than men. And if you were to take away the names of the countries, Ghana would perform better than most of the Western democracies in terms of female leadership in businesses, especially businesses that employ others. But if you go into the space of tech, then I think we're looking even worse than in markets like France. The fintech space in particular is not that old in Africa, although we see a lot of innovation on the continent. The last year, there was 350 million US dollars invested continentally in fintech, and that was a quadrupling of the previous year. So if you can think about when limited resources, they typically go to down the easiest path. The easiest path is typically men who studied in Europe or studied in the US who move back typically to Nigeria or Kenya and are able to get the money that they need to start their tech companies. In the fintech space, Flutterwave, Paystack, M-Pesa, these are all companies that were founded by men.
Ok. Est-ce que, alors on va passer à la deuxième partie de notre sujet, on va creuser un
So
petit
this
peu
brings
sur
me to the second part of our topic about feminine entrepreneurship. Do you believe that there is a feminine way to build a company, to manage a company? Yes. I'll give you some of my personal feedback. I've been working in FinTech for about 10 years. Back then, we were talking about financial innovations and the market increased. And my experience is that the presence of women is marginalized, and if we consider the higher positions, startup selection page and investors, I've almost been always the only woman, or there were no women at all. I wanted to tell you more about Arkea's story. I joined Arkea 3 years ago, and our company for external growth and our team for external growth and digital, there were only 3 other employees with me, 3 men. They are here today, so this team was not really mixed. It was not gender balanced, but it had a limited place in its environments, and it's just as soon as the team grew, it was quite harmonious, but grew and more women joined in. That's when the activity really thrived. The team went from 4 to 18 people, and out of the 18 employees, there are 10 women. And in terms of engaging with the ecosystem and partnership, as well as opportunities, it was impressive. We were able to get a better structure, and this brought us many opportunities. Another point I want to insist on is when we're talking about gender equity, it's not in terms of numbers only. For me, there is something that is important. It's mutual benefits and complementarity in peers. It could be 2 founders, 1 man, 1 woman. When we work with someone from the other sex, it's interesting, and we have to get out of each other comfort zone, and we are brainstorming easier. It's easier to brainstorm rather than fighting. It can be very constructive, and it lasts also better on the long run. At Arkea, we noticed that gender balanced teams perform much better than the others. Without any doubt, they perform very well. We will not disagree with the success of Litchi. Alain, you work with many fintech startups. Is there a feminine way? Well, it's important not to to feed this stereotype. But yes, there are differences. I like the idea of balance. That's what we are looking for, more than feminizing the sectors. And the story for success, I think, is balance. And if I am to give any personal experience as example, I'd say that startups that are managed by women are more anchored in the real life. Men, it's a stereotype, but they're all fighting for growth, like stronger and faster. It may have something to do with the keeping a cold head, or I don't know, without falling into stereotypes. But women are more caring and not to be too cheesy, but human relationships are based more on caring than old hierarchy may have been. But it's just ideas that women are better in HR. We have to be careful. No, we're just speaking about how women are made for finance. So what about you? No. I'm sorry. I'm a bit upset with this question. I think that it's very dangerous to make statements about what women are or are not good at. And I've seen women managers as bad as men, and I've seen women managers as good as men. But I agree that we need to find balance and diversity, most of all. So this diversity, we could speak in terms of gender, but also age, young, senior, extra senior, or diversity in terms of background. This is where we should look for balance, because globally speaking, we need to mobilize knowledge and skills from various people with various trainings and previous experiences.
Do you have any take on this question, Megan, or no risk? And
I very much agree. I think it's dangerous to talk about what is more what women do and what is more what men do, because you can see it play back then in the way that investors and others look at male-founded startups and female-founded startups. So there's now a study, it's about 2 years old, and it's become quite famous, that when investors are questioning men, they talk about the best case scenario. When everything goes right, how do you take over the world? How do you become the Uber of X, right? Because you think, okay, they're men, they're more risk takers, so let's ask them questions like this because they're going to go further. Whereas women can spend an entire pitch defending their technical capabilities. Because they are like, okay, as a woman, I'm sure you're great at managing your team and everyone loves you, but do you really know math? Do you really know finance? Can you really do tech? So by even talking about the differences in men and women, it subliminally gets into the minds of those who are then evaluating startups and are evaluating you not based on your resume or your experiences, but kind of where you fall in the spectrum from their idea of what the typical feminine traits are, the typical masculine.
It's very interesting what you're saying on this study that was published 2 years ago, because 5 years ago, when crowdfunding really came became famous, one American made a study on American biases, and 18 if biases were the same on private for private investors, and they share two biases: the geographical bias, so investors, private or public, they invest close to their place, and the gender bias. Investors tend to invest more in companies founded by men than by women. So there is a bias for companies founded by women. Will this company last? Will it be well managed beyond human resources and human relationships? Is the concept viable? We talked about quotas in our previous exchange. Do you think that we can reach equity without remaining shallow? Is it possible? FinTech revolution, it was spoken about at the region level. We engaged in a partnership action plan. We are working with BNP Paribas, Caisse d'Épargne, Caisse de Dépôt on a regional action plan for female entrepreneurship. It's about 300 million euros per year, and this is directed to women, addressed to women, and for me it's the main way to fundamentally change our society. And it starts early on in life, in high school, as we mentioned, explaining to women that creating and funding a business can be very exciting, and women who want to build their businesses, they have a strong relationship with autonomy and empowerment, and I think it's important to support this. But we also need to raise awareness and bring technical supporting tools in other regions where women may be facing different obstacles and barriers linked to their gender, but also to their level of education and access to education, and also access to financial resources. And there are also student fairs and many ways we can fight against and address this lack of confidence you mentioned about. It's very interesting that you said that an investor will focus on the core business, will ask questions to women about technical issues, whereas a man would never have to answer this type of questions. So we are addressing this type of issues with in partnership with local and regional associations, and these need to be sustainable actions. With public funding, we would only be able to do it for about 2-3 years, but we want something that would last longer. We are paving the way, but we need to make it sustainable. Alain? What about
Les quotas, c'est
quotas?
un sujet, c'est pareil, c'est aussi difficile à gérer que ce
It's
que disait
very
le précédent, parce que
difficult
dans certaines mesures, les quotas,
to
c'est
deal
oui, mais
with
bon, ça
this
déstabilise. À
issue.
certains égards, c'est presque
Uh,
une faute aux femmes, parce qu'on a l'impression que
it's
le
kind
talent est
of an
complètement
insult
transféré
to
aux femmes.
women
Et c'est,
because
moi, par
it
instinct,
it
comme
suggests
gauche, je suis
that
plutôt
talent and
réactif sur le quota.
experience
En même temps, je
are
pense
not
vraiment que
enough.
j'ai été travaillé dans
So
toutes les lois Copé Zimmermann
I think we should
qui
take it
voulaient
very
introduire une
carefully.
certaine
And
progression
I
dans la
worked
proportion des femmes dans
in
les instances de gouvernance. Les conseils
with
d'administration
the boards
l'application
and
habituelle est reportée d'année
governance
en année, même
councils,
si
and
bon, après,
the directory has
c'est
been
pareil au Parlement, on pourrait en parler toute une heure,
postponed.
il n'y a qu'à voir les partis
And it's
politiques
the
qui parfois,
same in
s'ils
the
n'introduisent pas
parliament.
des quotas
If
dans leur
we do not
législation, on
introduce
était obligé à un moment donné
quotas, nothing will
de toute
change.
façon,
So
on est en train
it's a way to
de faire quelque
trigger
chose
the
qui
change, but
est très
at the
problématique
same time,
et que
it's
dans les quotas, ça ne va pas suffire. Alors après,
very
pour compléter ce qui a été dit,
problematic,
mais sur
and it will
lequel
not
je serais quand même
solve
complètement
the
ajouté, je
fundamental
crois que je pense que
issue.
ce syndrome de
So if we
motivation,
believe
d'insouciance,
that
le syndrome
this
d'imposteur narcissique,
syndrome
etc.,
of
c'est très bon, moi je le pense.
motivation
Il faut
and
aussi travailler
ambition,
sur des
and
éléments, comme on le disait
also
avant,
feeling legitimate,
de modèles
we should
réussis. Hein. Nous, on fait beaucoup ça chez France
also
Télé, par
work
exemple.
on role models, successful
On
role
aime bien
models. And
pardon,
Merci.
voilà.
I have one
Victoria,
right
tout à
next
l'heure.
to me. Thank you. Yes,
Mettre en
well,
évidence des
that
parcours de
says it
réussite,
all.
d'épanouissement,
Uh,
pour montrer que c'est possible. Alors évidemment,
highlighting
tout le monde sait bien ce que c'est. Quand
career,
c'est incarné,
the career of women who were successful,
on
and
essaie de faire de l'accompagnement, parce que c'est souvent
also
plus dur de grandir
accompanying
avec des enfants.
women, because sometimes it's
Donc,
harder for them
on essaie
to
discrètement, c'est pas
start.
forcément chose
Um,
ostentatoire, mais
we are
de
trying
s'accompagner. Après, il y
to
a des éléments
support
assez
them,
durs, hein. Il y a des éléments
but
comme la législation,
there are
il
also
faut être fort en soins collectifs.
stronger
Nous, on a un sujet
elements such
sur la
as
gestion du congé
legislation.
maternité qui est tendu,
We
problématique, qui commence à
had
faire
a
une sorte
decision on
de sujet
maternity leave, for
de
example,
réglementation. On essaie de trouver le
and
bon équilibre
we
d'efficacité et de
also try to raise
mettre en place des écoles
awareness and
d'ingénieurs
communicating to
pour
in
motiver des vocations
high schools,
particulièrement
universities,
importantes.
and
Alors, c'est
communication is very
je peux
important.
terminer une petite
It's just
chose.
to add to what was said, and
Ce qui m'a
now
frappé
I would like
dans cette
to
table ronde,
um,
c'est une
comment on what you
qui
said,
m'a beaucoup
Megan.
parlé hier, qui est brillante,
I
etc.
talked to you
Je
yesterday.
termine par ce fait en disant que Megan comprend parfaitement le français
You
et le
understand
parle d'une manière
French
très
perfectly,
agréable.
and
Et c'est
you
typiquement ce
speak
qui me permet
French, but I
d'illustrer la
think
situation
it's
et de dire
a good
souvent,
illustration of
c'est soit
the
une femme qui rentre
situation.
vraiment avec le sentiment
Statistically speaking, a
qu'elle
woman
est
will
vraiment au
only
top du niveau
dare if
et
she
voilà.
thinks
Et
she is on
par contre,
top
pour faire
of
briller
her
la
game.
jeunesse, et
I'm
c'est
sorry,
ça,
Megan,
voilà,
to
en tout
put
cas, je
you in
comprends
the
parfaitement ce
spotlight,
qu'on dit
but
français.
we
C'est
can
pas
see that you
facile, c'est un peu
understand what
l'alchimiste
we're
qu'il
saying,
faut
and
faire son sens
it
évader.
is
Comme vous avez davantage
a good
fait sur
example
le fait
of
qu'il n'y a pas que les
the
garçons qui
fact
peuvent se
that
lancer
women
sans
should be
faire
more
partie du sujet. Pardon,
confident.
Megan.
Sorry, Megan.
Tu veux répondre en français?
Do you want to answer in French? Not at all. Yes, the question of giving value to successful role models. It's important for the young ones because when we are looking for women role models, it's kind of complicated. The main example was in sports. More and more young girls had role models of women sport players, and more women then decided to do these sports. And I think it's the same in every sectors. One day, someone told me something that I remember, and it's quite difficult on an everyday basis. Sometimes we do not want to be a role model, but you know what, Caro, Snoop Dogg. Do you know all of you? You know Snoop Dogg, right? Well, Snoop Dogg, the American singer. Well, he is a son of diplomats. He was born in a posh neighborhood of New York, but he is proud of his image as a rap singer, and he's a iconic of a community he was not originally part of. As long as women will not embrace their position and be proud of who they are, then thank you, Caro. It's quite funny. Earlier today, I was talking with a team, a FinTech team, and we realized that FinTech leader only had 5% of women using the tool, while it's a great tool to manage your savings and money in a very efficient way. So not only there are not women as entrepreneurs or management, but also as users. And there are many talented and expert women. And we talked to one earlier today, and again she felt into this this censorship. Please, ladies, to um, uh, uh, be proud of who you are and what you've succeeded in.
I think that probably we are about 5% of women, and we're obviously, although we have played a role in building up the project, but they tend to hang back a little bit. So please don't hesitate to come out of your comfort zone and to put yourself forward. Yes, Megan, was there anything that you would like to add? Est-ce qu'il y a des conseils que vous pourriez donner? Non, non. Je l'ai. A man.
No, après, Megan, you can answer, and then we have the question from the public, yes.
Sure. I would, it's kind of a resume of what was said, but I think that the only way you can be a successful entrepreneur is to authentically be yourself. It's too hard to also be pretending to be something else on top of it. And so I think by going out and just being, you with all of your perfections and all of your flaws is the best way that we can demonstrate to other young women that this is a career path that is possible, and to really go out and talk about what's easy and what's hard and what's different and what makes you great and what makes you have struggles, so that they don't have the imposter syndrome, right? Because if you get up on a stage like this and you say, like, I'm so perfect and this is great and everything is easy, then there's going to be another young woman sitting in the audience going, well, then what the heck is wrong with me, right? And so I would say, just authentically be yourself and focus on running your business, because that's the only way you're going to have enough energy to get to the finish line.
Yeah, we can make a big applause because it's a good sum up.
Caroline, do you have anything to add before we go on to the questions? Yes, to say that the study that you'll find, the study that we've talked about is on the France FinTech site. Are there any questions here? I was really very pleased by everything I heard because the content was really, really fascinating. Thank you very much. It really is the meaning that I wanted to give to this panel. I'm not here, so it can be risky. I'm letting people say what they want to say. Are there any questions from the audience? Yes, here's a question. Yes, hello. I have a question which is maybe a bit naive. I find it difficult as a man not to believe in determinism, as you said, that men are like this and women are like that, and also promoting the fundamental qualities of each sex. Expect, if, for example, managers, if it was proved chemically that women are better managers, they make better decisions, they're more risk adverse, and this is essentialism, and I hate that. So how can we manage that sort of thing? Have you got any advice that you could give me so that I can avoid that? Yes, I think this question is for you. That's terrible. How could you do that to me? In fact, we're contradictory when we say we need both. Why do we need to have both? Well, I'm going to try and wriggle my way out of this to say that if we want all of our suppliers, etc., and our collaborators are trying to do the same thing, so we're different way of approaching things, and it's not biological. At least I'm not competent. I'm not skilled enough to tell you whether or not that is the case. I'm not going to go any further on this question because I'm a bit scared that I'm digging myself a hole here. Would anybody else like to answer that? No? Any less complicated questions? Jean-Marc has a question. Jean-Marc Vittori, yes, I just wanted to add something from experience with a company director who I had lunch with, and I asked if there was anything different in management between men or women. So after the coffee, to have the coffee, and he thought about it, he said, well, twice a woman was invited to be part of the comics and had refused, and that had never happened with a man. So in human resources, I think there is this case as well. When you offer a man a post, he accepts it because he thinks that if he's being offered it, then he's good enough to do it. When you offer a woman a post, then she starts to wonder if she is capable of doing it. And the third thing is, I wanted to point out a study. There have been a lot carried out by economists, and one of them is very, very good, and that is you mentioned it. It is exemplarity, that we should show young people in high schools and in the university that there are women who have succeeded in the hard sciences. It's very efficient, and we observe several years later that this encourages a lot of young women to follow in that pathway. So exemplarity, the showing that women can be successful to young people of between 15 and 17 years old, then that works. Thank you, Jean-Marc. Now I'm going to recommend a book. It is What Is It to Be a Chief by Gerald de Villiers, because I've been reading it at night time, and you can see that it is a source of inspiration when you have a balance, not a command post, but it is a balanced management. It's very, very inspiring book, and it really is for everybody. So that is my book recommendation for everybody today. Thank you very much to all of you for all of the ideas that you have given. Thank you, Caroline, for standing in as moderator of this panel, and we're now going to move on to the next panel. So please, a round of applause please for this panel first.